Today on What I Wish I Knew at 30, I'm joined by a true giant of the food and agricultural industry, Philip Wilkinson OBE. Philip's career spans over 4 decades at the very highest level of leadership, innovation and transformation in the dairy and poultry sectors. Awarded an OBE in 2004 for his outstanding services to the dairy industry and later recognized as a colonel in the USA for global contributions to the food industry, Philip has left a remarkable legacy that continues to shape the way we produce and consume food. He was a driving force behind the meteoric growth of Two Sisters Food Group, helping to take it from a 375 million business to one valued at over 3 billion, leading one of the UK's largest vertically integrated broiler chicken operations. Beyond that, he has held influential roles as chairman, non-exec director, and advisor across a wide range of organisations, from small companies like Paramount 21 to the large Alltech, Egg, XYT, MHP, and many public and international boards. Philip's story is one of leadership, innovation, and global influence, from pioneering new strategies in agriculture to representing the UK at the European Dairy Association, and even defending the milk marketing scheme in the European courts. Today, he'll share with us not only the highlights of his extraordinary journey, but also the lessons learned along the way, the kind of wisdom that can inspire us to think bigger, lead better, and embrace opportunities with courage. So let's dive in. It's my great pleasure to welcome Philip Wilkinson, OBE, to What I Wish I Knew at 30. Philip, welcome to the show.
Good morning from a very wet, cloudy and grey autumn 1st of October morning from the north of England, North Yorkshire, God's own country.
Yeah, absolutely, indeed. Well, and welcome from sunny Melbourne. Philip, did I miss anything in your introduction?
Other than I spent 5 great years in Australia helping take Inghams from a venture capitalist acquisition to a pretty successful IPO just before COVID struck. So that was a great experience and a great 5 years in a great country with great people.
Absolutely. And I had the pleasure of spending a lot of time with you while you were out here. So I'm very, very grateful for that. So, Philip, imagine we're jumping in a time machine right now. You're 30 years old again. Where are you? What are you doing? And what's going through your mind at that stage of life?
Okay. At 30 years of age, I was working in the dairy industry at that stage, as you alluded to in the CV. And at that time, I was in the cheese industry, really. And I met a guy, I was farmhouse cheese agency manager. That's the cheeses that are really made on large farms with milk that is produced on those farms rather than the massive creameries that you see up and down the country and across the world for that matter. And I was farmhouse cheese agency manager, but I worked for a guy whose name was Rupert Burton, a really good guy, actually, interesting guy. He actually lived on Salisbury Hill.
Okay.
Salisbury Hill might be a name that you recognise, not because of the place, but because of the Peter Gabriel song,
Yeah.
Salisbury Hill. Well, this is where it came about, because Peter Gabriel and Rupert Burton were next door neighbours. And Rupert was a great guy, and he just said to me, at 30, he said, you should know what your next job is going to be, or have the one after that, and then have a faint idea what the next one after that was going to be. And he sort of framed me thinking in that way. And the thing that came to mind at that stage was because I'm not big on job interviews. I'm not a big fan of them, and I swore to myself that I would get to where I wanted to be, or into a place where I never had to do another job interview after the age of 40. And that was, in fact, correct, and it did materialize. But I was working with people in those days, and the farmhouse cheesemakers were big, influential landowners, and they were very influential with government, with agriculture ministers, and so on and so forth. And so it was a very tough old learning curve when I was trying to agree budgets with them, and they wanted to sell more at a higher price, and I was saying, hold on, the market can't actually handle this, or if we do try and sell more, we're going to devalue the brand because we're going to have to sell it cheap and compete against the commodity varieties. So that sort of focused the mind. It was a great learning curve. Everybody who saw me and said, are you taking on this role with the farmhouse cheesemakers? And I said yes. They said, well, it's a kiss of death because no one ever comes out of that well at the other end. But with a bit of luck and maybe a bit of judgment, we did come out of it well. And quite frankly, Fran, it paved the way for where we ultimately ended up. And I think this is probably the first interview that I have had since being less than 40 years of age. So I've been succeeded for the next 31 years, at least until today. But I don't think you're looking to hire me for anything unless there's
Right.
unless there's a hidden agenda behind here.
So Philip, did you feel like you had life completely figured out at 30, or were you just winging it?
On my tombstone, I've already got it written down. I've not done it with the lawyers or anything yet. And you use the word winging it tongue in cheek, but I take that. And I haven't decided which one to have on my tombstone. I'm not going to be buried, by the way. I will be cremated, but there will be a tombstone and there'll be ashes thrown in there or whatever.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the words are going to say. It's either going to be made a difference or got away with it. And I'm not sure which one that's going to be quite yet, but it might be both. Who knows? I might have one on the front and one on the back. So I could have a reverse tombstone. Who knows? Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I look forward to hearing when you decide which one.
Okay. Yeah. Well, somebody else might decide that for me. Who knows?
You never know.
Yeah.
You never know.
Yeah,
You're going to have to make
but
that decision.
this, Fran, nearly didn't.
Nearly didn't.
I have lost your connection.
That's all right. Don't worry. That's fine. It'll come back. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah, it's come back.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah. What I was going to say though, and I looked at your questions for guests at the top of the piece, and it was, what's one experience that at the time felt like the worst thing ever, but ended up shaping you? That's your note that you sent me in advance of the meeting.
Yeah.
And this is,
And we haven't got to that yet, though.
you haven't got to it yet. Okay. All right. Well,
Oh, you're going to be
fine.
trouble,
I
aren't
thought
you?
that
You're
I
going to be
thought that that's
trouble.
where we were going to. Okay. Well, have we done the first bit yet? Then have we done the?
Well, it depends. Have we done the first bit?
Well,
did you feel like you had life all figured out at 30, or were you just winging it?
No, I didn't feel I'd got it. I certainly wasn't winging it. I got an objective, and that was continual improvement. And I tried hard to do that, but I didn't say I want to be executive director of Ingham's in Australia, or I want to be this or that or the other thing. I just wanted to progress in an industry that I was comfortable in, and in an industry which provides a lot of varieties. Much later than me being 30, when back in 2003, we floated Arla Foods UK PLC onto the stock market. I'd had 30 plus years in the dairy industry at that stage, and I thought there was obviously with the stock market flotation, there was a little bit of money kicking about, not mega amount, but it was comfortable. And I said I was going to finish when that deal was done, and I did. Did all, and faffed around for a few months with fancy cars and so on and so forth, and thought I'm going to enjoy this. And guess what? After a few months and the phone wasn't ringing, I started to miss it. And I got a phone call from, well, it was from banks actually, to say, would I help with a turnaround of a food business that was mainly poultry oriented. And I said, well, I don't know anything about the poultry industry. I've been in the dairy industry for the last 30 years or so. And they said, well, yeah, it's only about putting a business plan together and a strategy to go in front of the banks to see whether it will work and see what their opinion is of it. And so I said, yeah, okay, we'll have a look at that. And a few people were put together to do that. And so we did, and we presented it to the banks, and the banks came at the end of it and said, okay, would you be involved in operationally managing this process? And I said, no, not really. It's not for me. I don't know anything about this industry. I know about the plan, but I don't know enough about the industry. And they said, well, we're looking to make this a 2-year fix. So it's only going to be 2 years, and we'll make it attractive enough to you to have a go. So I said, okay, we'll do it. And that's when I became involved in Grampian, which you would have seen on the CV. And quite frankly, that is exactly what we did, and we ultimately ended up selling the company to Vion, which was a Dutch farmer cooperative a few years later. But in that process, it made you realize that in the food industry, there are so many things that are alike. In dairy, the big issue that made or lost you a fortune was cream, skim, milk balance. It was dealing with because everybody's healthy eating, so it was semi-skim, skim milk. So what the hell
Yeah.
did you do with the cream? Because you have to throw the cream away, then that makes the raw material just not valuable
Yeah, it
at all.
makes it
So you had to
very
find a
low
way to
yield.
deal with that. In chicken, unbeknown to me, because I knew nothing about it, it's dark meat, white meat balance. So in the UK, we don't like leg meat, wing meat, and so on. It's about the breast. Everybody wants the breast, but you can't. Hitherto, anyway, the geneticists haven't been so smart to create a chicken with no legs and no wings. So right now, you've still got to deal with that.
Rightly so,
So
I'm going to interject there.
yeah. So you were in a place where, to be quite frank, when you started speaking to the retailers about these issues,
Mm,
you were speaking to the same guy because you were dealing with the trading director of Fresh. So
yeah,
it wasn't so dissimilar, and he was dealing with exactly the same things. So what we had to try and do is sell the dark meat through other suppliers into those retailers so
yeah,
that they could get the amount of chicken that they needed. Because here in the UK, chicken is 50% of meat protein consumed. It's 49% chicken, 23% beef, 18 pork, and 10 lamb. So it's massive. But if people wanted more chicken because they want the breast, but you can't get rid of the dark meat, then it was a loss maker for the farmer, for the processor, and so on and so forth. So we got the other suppliers through the retailers to actually list. If you're making chicken soup, then you've got to use the dark meat from our supplier to go into soup, onto the pizza toppings, onto other ingredients, and so other products, in order to then consume and what you call balance the carcass. And that made all the difference. It's rather different actually in Australia, Fran, because in the main, chicken is consumed as a griller, whole
together.
bird. So you eat the whole thing, whereas we don't have that. Tiny proportion of chicken is bought here in the UK and in Europe as whole bird. So
Yeah,
that's
it's
why you've got a massive difference.
completely different. And look,
Yeah.
that's fascinating insight into the chicken industry, poultry industry. Bringing you back to uh, when you were 30, and I guess one of the things that comes out of all of that industry is the power of relationships, and sort of where those relationships take you, and how you can connect and network through whichever industry you're in. But just taking you back to when you were 30, what was your biggest dream at that time? And did life take you where you expected?
Yeah. I wanted a Rover 2000 motor car. That's what I wanted. Joking apart, I wanted a Rover 2000. That's the one with the fast bike. That's really what I wanted.
Dad had
Yeah, yeah, and it was red, and I didn't get it at 30, but I got it during my 30th year because
Mhm.
I flipped at that stage. Milk quotas, which you may have heard about in Europe, were introduced on the 2nd of April 1984. And of
Mm.
course, I was 30 in October the previous year, to be fair. So everybody knows how old I am now on your podcast.
I'm going to work that one out.
And probably saying he's had a hard life or he's done looks well on that, but whatever. Milk quotas were introduced, and that was a massive issue across the whole of Europe. And I was asked, and it's going back, Fran, to what I said maybe 10, 15 minutes since about the farmhouse cheesemakers and them being really hard people. We were in a place then where you'd got to talk to farmers about cutting back their production. And I was called by the then chairman of the Milk Marketing Board of England and Wales. His name was Sir Steve Roberts, and he invited me for breakfast at the Savoy Hotel in London. Now that was a bit posh for a young lad from Sheffield at that age to go and meet Sir Steve Roberts for breakfast in the Savoy Hotel in London. And I went without a tie and was immediately stopped by some officious guy who said, "You cannot come in here without a tie." So they gave me some scruffy tie with all gravy stains down the front of it. And I went in for breakfast. And he said, "Look," he said, we need somebody, a regional manager for the Milk Marketing Board, to deal with farmers. And you've been able to deal with some of the toughest farmers in the country with these farmhouse cheesemakers to talk them through why they've got to be compliant as far as milk quotas are concerned and so on and so forth. And we think that you're the man for the job, particularly for the north of England. And that was a life changer because I took that role. And he said, we're putting a new board member in there. His name is Ian Watson, who I was only speaking to yesterday. He was 10 years older than me. He was the youngest board member of the Milk Marketing Board, and I was the youngest ever regional manager of the Milk Marketing Board. And we had a great relationship from about 84 till about 1990 through that difficult
That
period.
difficult period,
And
yeah.
it was at that stage, it's like everything happens when you think about it. Did you plan this or plan that?
Mm.
Or did you wing it? Well, I didn't plan it and I didn't wing it, but it's marvelous how it's an evolutionary process. I said, yeah, okay, I will make that move to dairy, or I will make that move. And then depending on what that delivered in terms of opportunity, in terms of objectives and success criteria and how successful you were in achieving those success criteria, then you got recognized. And back to my thing about not having another interview, you get a telephone call. Can you come and see me? And it's a little bit like one volunteer is worth 10 conscripts. When you don't have to apply for a job and enter into a beauty parade, I don't mean that in a demeaning way, but when you get a phone call, you're rather more in the pound seats than you are if you're sitting in a row of 6 anxious people wondering where their next mortgage payment is coming from, and hopefully it's from a positive outcome of this job interview. So that's how things unfolded, Fran. And as a result of that, which I wasn't expecting,
Yeah.
this came about. I then met people in the dairy industry who said, come to Associated Dairies. We then did the management buyout of Associated Dairies, ultimately sold it to Arla Foods. And that's when, as a result of that management buyout, we'd worked with 3i's and venture capitalists and so on, knew that we could turn something around. And that's when Grampian, as I say, came over the hill at that stage. That's when I then met Ranjit at Two Sisters, who was a young entrepreneur,
Yeah.
late 30s or whatever at that stage, maybe a little bit more. And he said, Phil, will you help me? I want to take the business to 1 billion by the end of 2010. And this was September 2005 or 6. And we ended up turning it to 3.3. I was making a speech at that in that capacity of exec director of Two Sisters when the owner of Alltech was in the audience, and he collared me after that and said, would you come and help us in an advisory capacity? We want to get more upstream, talking to retailers, talking to processors and so on. So, yeah, that then took me out to Australia, where I met with Ingham's, chief executive and chairman, who we got on well. And he phoned me and said, when are you going back? We might need a hand. Can you come and help us? And so none of it was planned, but the direction of travel was in place. But where I didn't know, let's put it in these terms, Fran, what I didn't know was which towns we would be stopping at in that, on that
On
journey,
the way
you
through.
know,
So
simple as
if
that.
you, I mean, obviously this podcast is about sharing, those hard earned lessons and, and I suppose offering guidance and wisdom and insights into, how people, obviously you've been extremely successful and not everybody will have that degree of success. And if you were to look back over your journey and you could sort of really itemize, what was the secret of that success? What were the things that made you different to other people that gave you that ability to actually climb that ladder, to be in that place, to take the opportunities when they came along?
Never take no for an answer unless no is the answer you're looking for.
I
Point
love
one.
that. I love that.
Simple as that.
Yeah.
Secondly, it was a guy that I met. He's probably dead now. His name was Louis Tice, but he was a management coach, a people coach, but he was a massive philanthropist. He's from Seattle in the States, and he's Louis Tice, and he made a lot of tapes about positive affirmations. And he was a life changer for me at the age of 30, 31. This isn't a plug for him, by the way, and I don't know whether he's
Yeah.
probably passed away, but maybe his legacy and maybe his business carried on. I really don't know. But he was a person who talked only about positive things. And just to give you a little example, I met him, he took in young children out of the ghettos in Chicago and like a foster parent up to a point. And these people were born in really bad areas with perhaps not a lot of help and support, not a massive amount of education from the parents maybe, and so on around them. These people were virtually taught to be failures. Little Johnny, you're going to fail at maths, you're going to fail at this. So when they did fail, they'd actually achieved what was expected of them. And what he got them to do, and it's a cracker's example, and it's taking it to an absolute extreme, Fran. But he said, and he did this practically. You were standing in a room, and let's say that there were tiles as wide as that paper, and he put it down. These were 3 to 12 meters long. So, can you walk down there without coming off the tiles? Yeah, of course you can, no problem. He said, right. Could you do that walking across, let's say, the Grand Canyon? And Well, of course I can't. No, no, actually, you can, because you've just demonstrated that you can. It's just that you put all these things around you, and that might be the height, or it's a stupid example. But what it's saying is that you can do certain things. You've just got to take what was surrounding you away. And he said, if you look at if you're riding a bike and there's a puddle in front of you, the chances are you will ride the bike through the puddle. Whereas if you don't see the puddle, you don't focus on the puddle, you go around it. And it's the same with golfers, very, very pertinent right now, given the Ryder Cup this last weekend. But if you're a golfer and you've got a pond in front of where you're hitting the ball from on the fairway and the green,
Yeah.
guess what? The chances are an amateur golfer like me, a bit of a knobber in that space, it goes straight into the water. Whereas if you don't, you say, what water? There isn't water. You know that you can hit that ball 100 yards without water there all day long, but put water there and guess what? It's in the water.
Yeah.
Forget about the water and get on with it. So
What you
that's
focus
another
on.
thing, positive. But then the most important thing for me was this, and particularly in sales, but it's in everything in life. Yeah, I can remember as a young salesman, very naive young salesman, trying to sell milk machines into factories in Sheffield. And you would see the buyer there and you'd walk in, little, 25, 24, 25-year-old, and you'd say, so, thanks for seeing me. I know you're busy. I'll be as quick as I possibly can. I know you're busy, and I'll get out your hair top speed. Forget about all that, because you immediately look nervous and you look uncomfortable. You don't look reassured. You walk in there with your head held up, and you shake a firm handshake and say, thanks, Fran, for seeing me today. Wise move on your part. This is going to be the best half hour of your time you're going to spend today, because what have I got something that is going to make a difference as far as you and your business is concerned. And you go in there positive. Absolutely go in there positive. So don't go in there apologetic. Don't apologize for being there. Don't apologize for what you do. Just go in there and do it. Absolutely go in there and do it. That would be my that would be my advice.
Your
Yeah.
words of wisdom from I
Yeah.
love that.
The one other thing that I would say, by the way, as well, this was feedback from a gentleman who, again, might well have passed away. His name was Jeffrey Barr. He was chief executive of Dairy Crest. And when I was in that farmhouse cheese role, he came into my office about 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, and that was based in Crewe in Cheshire. And he said, right, he said, what have you done? What have you done this week that if you hadn't have done, it would have made a difference to the business and we wouldn't be in as good a place? And I told him that. And then he said, and what decisions did you do with this? And what decisions did you do that? And I said, I did this, 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 and this. He said, Philip, this is something that is very difficult to find in people these days. Everybody wants the stripes. Everybody wants a salary. Everybody wants the Rover 2000 car, but they
Mm.
don't want to make the decisions. He said, you are making decisions. And he said, that is something that I find very hard to find people like that in the business. And he said, as far as I am concerned, it's great advice, Fran. He said, you keep making decisions. And he said, if you're 70%, you're 100% right. But he said, if you're 70% right and 30% wrong, I will take that all day long, because you just can't get people to make decisions at all these days. And I've always done that since as well. So several factors, maybe 4 or 5 factors there that perhaps go some way to answering your question.
Yeah, no, I love that. And and I think that is important, someone that can make a decision and then reflect and actually be able to, say, yep, that went really well. That didn't go so well. We need to adapt. We need to change. Absolutely right. So many people are not prepared to make those decisions
Yeah.
for
And
fear of.
the other thing is one saying that is so wrong in life, in my view, and it certainly applies to me, and you've seen me on the odd occasion. Patience is not a virtue.
It's not. Quick decision's a good decision,
Yeah.
right or
Yeah.
wrong. At least then you can steer the ship.
yeah, yeah.
So looking back now, Philip, what's something that you were completely wrong about at 30?
Well, no, I'm going to change that slightly. I'm going to say that I was wronged
Okay.
potentially at 30, and
Yep.
that would have been life changing for me. I would say probably we would not be sitting here today had this gone the wrong way for me. And it's not really a food industry question, although it's as a result of being in the food industry that I got myself in this position, because I was
Mm.
taken out by a supplier. A number of us were taken out by a supplier to an off-road day, right, driving 4x4s up hills and down dales and so on and so forth. And this was up in the Lake District in Cumbria. And we were staying overnight, and there was a competition that day as to who was the best driver and blah, 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 blah. Anyway, we all were staying in a hotel at the side of the M6 at Penrith in the north of England, in the north of the lakes. It's called Gateway to the Lakes. And I was getting got the car, got into the room, was actually in the shower, and the bang, bang, bang on the door. And I shouted, "Oh, I'm in the shower. Come back in 5 minutes." I thought it was somebody come to turn the bed down or whatever, bring you another pillow. And so, "I'm sorry, I've got the police with me." And it was the hotel manager. Crumbs. So I dived out. I thought, God, something's happened at home. One of my children's been hurt or something like that. Anyway, out I walked with a towel wrapped round me. And he said, "Is your car the silver Mercedes Benz?" And I said, "With a number plate W10WHY. Shouldn't put that out on your podcast, should I? I've still got that number plate so people
No,
know I am."
that's all right. Well, we
But
can.
that's an interesting number plate, by the way. YOY. So that maybe puts something into context as yeah, YOY. But I said, what's the problem? He said, "Did you notice anything unusual?" And this is part of a lifetime lesson. "Did you notice anything unusual when you parked your car?" And I should have said no. But I actually did, Fran. I hope this isn't going to take up too much of your
No, no,
podcast
no. It's
today.
fine. Enthralled.
So I said, I did actually. I said the car that was parked next to me was straddling the white line. And he said, "Can you remember what sort of car it was?" Well, I'm a bit of a car buff. I said, "Yeah, it
Mm.
was an ice blue, like this sweater. It was an ice blue Volkswagen Passat." I mean, I could have, why would you think that with 100, 200 cars in a car park? But I recognized the thing.
Yeah.
So he said, "You're quite observant." I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "It's just that the car has been trashed. Somebody's put a key or something down the side of it and put a note on the windscreen to say, 'This is for taking 2 parking spaces up.' And you are parked right next to it. So,
No.
Mr. Wilkinson, you seem like our prime suspect here." To which I said back to him, I said, "Why would I be a prime suspect? I'm parked. It ought to be somebody who has had to park on the roadside or whatever that you should
Yeah.
be looking at, not for me." And this guy came back with a sort of smart young policeman from Penrith. I'll not say words that I shouldn't say on a podcast, but he was quite a smart guy, or thought he was. And said, "No, actually, in most instances, most people who do these things are the ones who park close to him." So and he showed me the note that had been put on the windscreen. And I made the mistake, Fran, of picking the blooming note up in my fingers so I could have got my fingerprints on it. And then I said, "Well, that's not my writing. It doesn't closely resemble my writing." I said, "I'll get you." I was being over helpful. And this is what when you're in court, they always say, not that I've been in court many
Get it
times,
wet.
but They always say, only answer the question that you're asked. I gave them too much information. I said, let me show you my writing. And let's say I've got the diary out like that. Oh, I said, that looks pretty similar to me. Next thing, I'm in Penrith police station having my fingerprints taken and having to make a statement. And I'm accused of being the person who did this. And he said, have you got any witnesses that when you parked the car, that saw you go out? I said, well, the loads of us parked and we all went in different places. Everybody knows they saw me at check-in, but nobody could say categorically that I didn't get out of the car, put a key down the side of it, write a note, stick it under his windscreen wiper and said, don't park like this again or this is what happens. Anyway, cut a long story short, I was worried for some weeks until I then got a phone call from Cumbria Police to say, didn't say you didn't do it, didn't say you're innocent. They just said, we've got insufficient evidence to prosecute. To which I said, I want all this struck off then. I do not want this on my record because, Fran, going back again to the top of this podcast, if that had have happened and I'd got a criminal record, I probably wouldn't have got the OBE. I wouldn't have been able to travel to America. So many things. So that was one of life's biggest misjustices, of miscarriage of justice that could have that turned out okay in the end. But my God, it was frightening. Frightening at the time.
I'm sure it was.
Frightening at the time. Yeah, and you're hopeless, absolutely hopeless. Not a thing you could do about it.
No.
Not a thing.
And had they gone further and you had your fingerprints on it, no, that's awful.
Correct.
I mean, they say though, life is the best teacher.
Exactly.
Sometimes, as I say, curveballs come wrapped in disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that was a faux pas. That was an innocent one, but the economic, only answer the question that you're asked is the bottom line, because I probably was responsible for getting myself in that police interview room by being too helpful.
Yeah.
But anyway, there we are.
So, I mean, if, are there other areas in life, where, they say, the biggest curveballs are the ones that shape life. They are the ones, whether in business, relationships, even in your personal growth. What's one experience that at the time felt like the worst thing ever, but ended up actually shaping where you ended up?
Yeah. Well, I think we probably more than touched upon it was when I took on board the poisonous Chalice of the farmhouse cheesemakers with Lord Chewton and Sir Alton Wade, who was the treasurer of the Conservative Party in the UK. And I can remember we were travelling up to Scotland to sell red Leicester cheese to I think it was Lonsdale and Thompson, which was a big cash and carry operator at that time in the UK. And Alton was one of these people who was a typical entrepreneur. He was very, very positive sort of guy, but quite unrealistic, but very, very wealthy. As I say, he became Lord Wade of Mollington when Margaret Thatcher got re-elected for a second term of office. He was knighted when she got in the first time as fundraiser, and then he was elevated to the Lords the next time. And he had some cheeses that weren't all that special. And he had a big Jaguar car, V car. And we were traveling up the M6 north in the Lake District. And he said, well, we should do this. I said, Alton, no, I could call him Alton. His name Sir Alton or Lord Wade, but I knew him well enough. I said, Alton, we can't do this. And every time I said no to something or this is going to be difficult or whatever, the speedo went up another 10 miles an hour. And we were probably doing about 120, 130 miles an hour. And this guy was not young.
Not.
Yeah, about by this time. And his face, he wasn't the picture of health at the best of time. He liked a glass of whiskey, to say the least. And he had the reddest face you could ever imagine. Well, it went redder and redder and then turned purple. And I just said, Alton, for Christ's sake, if you're going to give me a bollocking, can we just tune down the accelerator a bit and maybe pull onto the hard shoulder? But I'm just telling you how it is and how it's going to be. But these were the people who framed me, Fran, because I couldn't have met more influential and more important people
Yeah.
than those who had real connect, and they were people who then introduced me into the political circles. Cecil Parkinson was godfather to Alton's youngest son, and so on. The dog clearly doesn't like what I'm saying here.
I was
To be
hoping
fair.
you couldn't pick that up on the microphone. No, I think
But it's being able to deal with those people. So that was the biggest grounding, because everybody said, and it had happened before, everybody who had taken that job ended up unemployed, out of work, thrown out, discredited, and so on. They say you're taking the poisonous chalice here. You're certainly taking the poison chalice. But what I did do when I took the job, again, is not taking no for an answer. I said, I will take it on a secondment. And that means that I will do it for a fixed amount of time. And when that time comes and elapse, I go back into Dairy Crest at least the same grade that I was at before, with all the same terms and conditions. So they couldn't then let me go as a result of that role. But then what happened, Fran, was the complete reverse. Because when I got asked to go back to Dairy Crest, the then chairman of the Farmhouse Cheesemakers Federation went to see Sir Steve Roberts, the chairman of the Milk Marketing Board, and said, "We don't want Philip to leave. We want him to stay because he's doing a good job." And he said, "That's fine." And they came and told me this. The Farmhouse Cheese Federation chairman, John Beckett, came and told me this. I said, "John, that's no good." I said, "I'd got promotion. This is promotion for me. This was more money and everything that
yeah.
was on that agenda around the age of 30 years of age, which is what I've said." And quite frankly, I said,
Just one sec. Let me just go. I don't know I've got someone at the door. Hang on one sec.
right.
But I can cut this.
Okay.
It won't be a minute.
All right.
Layla, I'm in the middle of a recording. Right. Come on. Sorry.
So I said to him, "John, fine. I'm honoured by the fact that you want me to stay, but I'm at that time I'd got a mortgage and things going on, and I said, I can't." He said, "Right, what was the deal you were being offered?" And I said, "Well, it was this and this and this." He said, "Don't worry about that." He went straight down to Sir Steve Roberts at the Milk Marketing Board, and he said, "We don't want Philip to leave, but we do not want Philip to be disadvantaged in any way, shape, or form as a result of this. And the fact that we've come to see you about this and get us off your back because he's doing a good job for us, you pay him at least what he was going to get in the other job for continuing to do this role until ultimately the Farmhouse Cheesemakers Federation was absorbed within Dairy Crest." I saw that through and then moved on from there. And going back to your question, Fran, had that not have been the case, I would then have not got the regional manager of the Milk Marketing Board when milk quotas came in, dealing with difficult farmers with big grievances. So all the dominoes were lined up and it worked fine. So,
Yeah.
that.
And probably, I mean, if you had to identify, what do you think the best skill was that you had at that time?
Whether it's a skill or whether it's a thought process, it was better to have tried and failed than not have tried in the first place. And I think my skill at the time was back to what I said before, and that is you sat in budget meetings and these people were so powerful people that they would try and get you to agree on a budget, whether it be volume or whether it be price or a combination of the two. And they would put so much pressure on. I'd seen it happen with predecessors that you end up giving in. And then, of course, when you do fail to achieve those prices points or volume points, then all of a sudden it's your fault and you were fired as a result of it. I would sit in that meeting until they were blue in the face saying, no, this is the volume. These are the prices that I am prepared to commit to. That is what I will deliver. And my motto would be under promise and over deliver. That would be my advice to anybody who's into a career where budgets and prices are key. Now, there's a lot of IT stuff where that isn't the case these days, so it's not relevant to there. But when it comes to volumes and prices and EBITDA, then that's what you stand firm. Stand firm.
But you,
And always remember, when you go in for a job, anybody new looking for a job right now, and thereafter, the best time to get your best pitch in is the first time. So on your salary, or go high and you can always come down. Whereas if you go in too low, trying to irk that up is more and more difficult. So go in high, but be prepared to come down. Don't go in too low, because then when you realize you've gone too low and you can't afford to live, put food on the table, pay your mortgage and blah, 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 that's an extreme. But getting that up is far more difficult.
But if we go back to, to your younger days as well, I mean, when you're talking about primary producers and the supermarkets and going through all of the elements that you did and all of the stakeholders that you did, that you were involved with, do you think that your ability to be able to communicate at all levels with a farmer, with someone who's actually on the land, as well as with, we've heard some pretty powerful names being mentioned, and, to not everybody ever gets the opportunity to go across the whole of an industry.
Yeah.
What do you think was the most important thing for you that allowed that to happen? Do you think it was your ability to communicate with all stakeholders?
Well, we're probably covering different questions in
Oh,
different
it's fine. I think we
on
I
here,
think
but no, I'm fine with that. But when it comes to another question, if you're sticking to your script here,
well, we're
then
clearly not, are we?
it's going to probably repeat itself. But
That's fine. Sorry about that. Let
I
me do
would
that.
yeah, I would without a shadow of a doubt say that I've always tried to work the line. So you run with the hare and you run with the hounds. You always treat people all the way up and down the supply chain in exactly the same way, and find a way to be able to communicate with the guy in the warehouse as well as communicate with the chief exec of the business. And if you do communicate with those people and spend time with those people, then quite frankly, you get to know more about the supply chain, so you can speak with conviction and authority about those issues. And I guess I've been fortunate that I've worked at the sharp end. I made a point when I was even in the likes of Ingham's, and I'd go to the Murray plant in Brisbane, Australia, and I would be on the production line, and I knew everything about those carcass balances. I knew everything about the yields coming off. I worked with the suppliers. So I knew what I was talking about. I've got a pretty good, which is lucky, retention of information that I can recall. Like I said, milk quotas were 2nd of April 1984. Who would remember that date? Or when we floated the business, 27th of October 2003.
Yeah.
Some
Yeah.
geeky
They're
knack
relevant.
of being able
Yeah.
to do that. But then that resonates with people when you come to talking about a particular issue that, oh, well, he knows he knows how it came about, because people always say, don't talk about the past, talk about the future. But in many instances, particularly these days, you've got to know how you got here in order to be able to make the appropriate changes to take you to the next stage of development. There is
Absolutely.
no, yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit like the old adage that you ask somebody directions and you say, I want to go to, uh, I want to go to Heathfield. And they
Mm.
say, and you're somewhere, you say, well, I wouldn't want to start, I wouldn't start from here. Well, but that's where you are. So you've got to start from there, haven't you? You know, yeah, well, I want to start. Well, so where do you want me to start from then? You know,
Yeah, exactly.
and
Exactly.
then a silly thing like that, and it's marvelous how you take it because you're looking for an answer, but then you don't really think it through. So you've got to sit back and you've got to compute what is said to you. When I was working for the Milk Marketing Board, there was a big cycle race in the UK. It's now the Tour of Britain, but it was called the Milk Race because it was sponsored by the Milk Marketing Board in those days.
Mm.
I used to go around ahead of the milk race, just an hour or two ahead, putting the signs up as to where the cyclists were going to go so that, and you got all the police and all the entourage. And I can remember being in a little village in North Yorkshire, not far from Home Firth, where they filmed Last of the Summer Wine. You perhaps get that programme in Australia, for all I
We
know.
do.
And I can remember driving up this high street in this little village, and I said, I want to go to this place. And there was an old guy with a walking stick. He's obviously their man and boy. Oh, he said, "Hi, lad." He said, "Turn right where the village cross used to be." And I said, "Fine. Yeah, thanks for that." And off I set. I thought, hold on, how the bloody hell do I know where if I knew where the village cross used to be, I wouldn't be asking you damn directions, would I? But you do it and set off. I thought, oh, what a plonker. What a absolute plonker, because so
Brilliant.
don't yeah, yeah.
I
Yeah,
love that. I love that.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
going to bring us back to the script because I know that we can talk forever, and I'm sure everyone's enjoying the stories and the banter. It's great. But do you think that young professionals and entrepreneurs today are struggling with the same things that we did, or do you think they're facing a completely different world?
I don't think that they're struggling with the same things that we did, but they've got the same issues that we had to deal with in terms of their direction of travel. But I mean, things have changed so much. When I came out of uni, I was prepared to do just about anything. And it's like everything. You came out of uni and you applied for a job and you got the usual answer, oh, thanks for your application, we haven't got any vacancies at the moment, but when we have, we'll bear you in mind. And that's a little bit like a thanks but no thanks, but it's a kind
Yeah.
way of saying that. I was lucky back in 1970, whatever it was, early 1970s, that in those days it was pretty full employment, and I was prepared to do anything. And I lived in South Yorkshire at the time, which was at the time big in terms of the coal fields, massive in terms of the steelworks. Sheffield Steel was its world renowned, or was at the time, still is to some degree. And I just thought, I need money. I wanted to do things. I'll do anything you like. And I went into the steelworks and ended up being a crane driver
Wow.
over the furnaces in the melting shop. So I had a magnet on a gantry crane, and I used to drop the metal into the kiln, into the furnace for
Mm.
melting to make into the ingots to make into steel. So I was in a place in those days, I think people were in a place in those days, Fran, where if you were prepared to work and just say, well, I've got a degree in agriculture, so I've got to be a liaison chemist, or I've got to do this or that, the other thing. If you were prepared to do different things and wait for that time to come, as long as you didn't wait too long because you'd lose your relevance, then
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think the difference now, as we've become far more and more automated, as we are not a skill set
Yeah.
until something else came. I think the expectation now of younger people
Mhm.
is much higher. Everybody wanted to come out of university and wants 20 grand a year and a 5 Series BMW, those expectations weren't there in my day. And of course, you've got a work from home culture now, which is rather different. Working from home was not an issue. Plus the fact that I went 21 years without a day off work, sick. Not one day. Whereas people throw sickies, or some people are genuinely, of course, many people are genuinely sick. I've got to be woke in what I say, but there are so many people, even around me, who, oh, I had flu yesterday, I'm okay today. Well, you don't have flu one day and you're okay the next. I mean, it just isn't like so. I think you've got a different work ethic, but I think you've got a different expectation ethic now, and I think that needs to be managed. People coming out of uni, looking in at IT, AI. I mean, I think that's got to be a worry for people at the moment. My son is in the creative. He's a artistic director, but the easiest thing is in the world is to press a button now and say, create something that Tom Wilkinson would have done, or create a song that Paul McCartney might sing. These are worries because all of a sudden you might not be, if you're a TV presenter, if you're a podcast host, you could put somebody in that place without the dog barking in the background and so on, and
Sorry about that.
have a flawless interview without any problems at all. So I
Don't
think
worry about
these are
that. We will have. With
yeah,
this, we'll
these are,
put our AI buttons
yeah,
afterwards, and this
yeah,
will be,
these are,
you'll what
yeah, to answer your question, those are the different. Yeah, to answer your questions, though, those are the
yeah,
different issues that you. I think same concerns, but different playing field.
yeah. And things are
Quite good.
moving so fast, aren't they?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah,
is completely different.
yeah.
Philip, we've covered the deep stuff, I think. We've covered that journey of a very, very small part of that journey that's taken you to where you are now, and shared some of the wisdom of, of that journey, and that, that I know people will find really, really interesting. I'm going to hit you now with some quick fire questions. Okay. These are going to be a little bit more fun, and don't have to overthink them. This is about just the first things that come to mind. So, Philip, what was the worst business or life advice that you ever got?
Be patient.
Yeah, don't do that. Okay,
Yeah,
good. I love that. Yes,
yeah,
you don't be patient. Make
yeah,
decisions, move quickly.
yeah. Yeah, I don't like patience. I said that
No,
earlier on. Patience is not a
you
virtue.
did.
I did an interview some years since for the Yorkshire Post, which is the widest regional newspaper readership in the UK. And that was a question, not quite the same, but it was something like, what's an anecdote that you don't believe in? And I said, patience is not a virtue. A lot of people say, be more patient. No, and tolerant. I make a New Year's resolution every year, and that is to be less tolerant than I was the previous year.
I love that. And how does
Stand
that
by
work
it.
for you?
It works fine for me. Whether it works for everybody around me is a different matter, but you need to interview them on
Absolutely.
that one, not me.
That's it. But all
Yeah,
you have to be responsible for is you, isn't it? And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
the truth in this world.
yeah.
If you could have lunch with any historical figure, who would it be?
I was asked this question in Australia, in Sydney,
Mm,
when I was with Ingham's, and it's a very simple answer. Nelson Mandela.
yeah.
What a great guy. What a great man. I don't know whether you've been to Robben Island, but I mean, just I would have loved to have spent lunch with Nelson Mandela. And if you ask me for a second choice, it would be David Attenborough.
Me too. And if you get the opportunity to do that, please can I come too?
Yeah, you're
Thank you.
buying. You're
Oh, yeah,
buying.
fine. It's fine. It
Okay.
would be
Yeah,
worth
yeah.
it, Philip. It would be
Okay.
worth it.
Yeah, yeah.
What's a guilty pleasure you refuse to apologize for? I don't know if I'm brave enough to listen for this.
Sports cars and motorcycles.
What are you riding at the moment?
So I've got unfortunately, I had a stroke a year since us now.
Yeah.
Up until then, I'd ridden Harley Davidson, Electroglide, and then for the last, I suppose, 20 years or so, a big BMW Tourer
Mm.
K1600 GTL. But that's about the heaviest motorbike that I think money can buy. And even though I came out of the stroke, touch wood, the other end okay, quite honestly, I just thought a bike that big and doing long trips, North Coast 500
Yeah.
down to southern Spain, was too much. Then I bought myself a little a BMW that's a single cylinder 300cc that can potter around the Yorkshire Dales.
Lovely.
It won't tempt me to go long distances. And it's a little bit like when you've had a motorbike since you're 16 years of age, it's a bit like smoking 80 cigarettes a day. You can't just stop just like that. So I thought, I've got to gear down. I actually took the motorbike in to be sold in BMW in Shipley, just outside Bradford, and I sold the thing. After we'd haggled for half an hour, I sold the bike, and as I was walking out, I looked back in the showroom, and there must have been 150 bikes there. I thought, God, there's got to be a bike that is a halfway house between me being full on to not having it. I walked back in, and he said, "Oh,
Not you again.
you're not telling me the deal's off, are you?" I said, "Well, some and some." I said, "Have you got something that is small that might just work?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got this." And because my bike was quite expensive, Fran, it was just a case of, well, instead of me getting that back for it, I got
Good.
less back for it, but I got a new
And
motorbike
like,
in the process, so that was fine.
fantastic. I
And
love
the
that.
car's a Porsche Carrera S, to be honest, so that's
Nice.
quite
Well,
nice.
I'm doing
That's
my
quite nice.
motorcycle license in over Australian summer. So that's my
Right.
next thing.
Okay.
So Philip, if your 30-year-old self had a theme song, what would it be?
What have you done today to make you feel proud, Heather Small?
I don't even know that one, but I'm
You
going
do.
to listen to it
Right,
because it sounds great.
you're gonna get an extra bonus, but of course that you might have to pay royalties to Heather Small on it. It's what have you done today to make you feel proud? You've heard that all over the world. Heather Small.
Right?
Yeah, I
Haven't.
promise you have. And
Okay,
I
well,
thought
I'm
you
going to
were a hip girl, Fran.
clearly not.
Clearly
That's
not.
no,
Yeah, yeah,
clearly not. But we will. I will be
yeah,
looking that one up.
yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah, yeah.
And the last question, what's one thing you absolutely sucked at in your 30s but have mastered now?
Nervous as hell about public speaking.
Really?
Yeah, as when you first get asked, I can remember I was it was at a event that was organised by Express Dairies in Sheffield, and
Yeah.
I was invited as the sales guy for the milk marketing board with the milk machines, not knowing a thing about being asked to say something. And I was in the audience, and the gentleman got up and said, "Oh," he said, "we've got Philip Wilkinson, the milk marketing board. He's going to tell you a little bit about this milk machine." It was a Society of Dairy Technology meeting. And I got up and I waffled my way through it. And that was my first encounter. I thought, I've got to get better at this. Uh, I mean, I think some people might have even frozen in the first place. So I wasn't that bad, but I wasn't comfortable. Whereas now, if you don't get an adrenaline rush and you don't have nerves, like next week after next, I'm addressing a meeting. I think there'll be 3,500 in
Yeah.
a convention center in the States. That's taking it to an extreme. If I didn't get adrenaline rush before that, then I wouldn't be the right person to be doing the job,
Keep doing it. Yeah.
quite frankly.
Yeah. I agree.
So I like that, but up to a point, I think I'm getting there in that.
Well, you've had quite a lot of practice, haven't you? So
Yeah,
hopefully it's something that you're pretty good at now.
yeah, yeah.
Philip, that was incredible. I know so many listeners are going to resonate with all of those stories, not just one or two but all of the stories that you've shared with us, and a little insight into your life and how you've come through from working with the cheesemakers to where you are now and the global influence that you have.
I'm going to do what I usually do now, and that is throw the interviewer. because we haven't finished. We haven't finished
No,
yet.
we haven't finished. Absolutely, we
No,
haven't. We've still
because
got a long way to
I've
go,
got a
but go on, you're
story.
gonna
I've
go.
got a story that I think your listener will love, to be fair.
Okay, go on
And
then, Philip.
I only thought about this, Fran, on this call. So when you say, am I winging it? Then the answer is
Yeah.
up to a point. Yes, I do. But I think given what you just said, you said at the top of the introduction that I got an OBE.
Yeah.
And I collected it in March 2000. And I was just started in the poultry industry at that time, 1st of November 2000. I got the OBE and it was all announced and so on and so forth. But then you get your call to either Windsor Castle, Balmoral, Edinburgh, or Buckingham Palace. I was lucky enough to go to Buckingham Palace. But I was in the office, so I'd got the date in the diary. Where I was going to Buckingham Palace. Hold on a second. I'm going to move you. Is that okay? Can I do that? Can I move?
Yeah, I
So
don't see why not. You're going to show us your OBE?
can you see that?
I can.
So
Yes, I
that's
can.
Elizabeth, that's the Queen, and that's Prince Philip, and that's what it is. And then that's my Freeman of the City of London.
Yeah, you can't see that at the minute, but
You can't. Oh, what a shame.
that's okay because a lot of our listeners will be
All right.
listening as
Not to
well.
worry. But that said, Fran, I was in the office on one afternoon, and my PA, Sally, rang me and she said, I've got a guy called Franz Fischler on the telephone from Brussels. I said, you're kidding. And looking at your face, it doesn't necessarily ring a bell.
No.
Franz Fischler was an Austrian. He was the agricultural commissioner for the European Union.
Okay.
And he said, she said, will you take the call? She'd no idea who he was either. So I said, yeah, of course I will. And he said, this is Franz Fischler speaking. I'm running a trade delegation to China and I would like you to be the UK representative. Obviously, we're in the EU at that time. He said, I'd like you to be the UK representative. So I said, oh, what an honour, Commissioner. That would be a great honour. Yes, I'd be delighted to. I said, have you got a date? He said, yes, it's whatever in March. I said, I'm sorry, sir, I can't do it. To which he said, a bigger thing, what can't you do? What have you got that's even more important than that? And this was a cracking. I said, well, actually, I'm with the Queen at Buckingham Palace receiving the OBE. And he just like rocked. It was a telephone call, but you could tell he rocked back on his heels and said, that's amazing. That's amazing. Well, he said, this delegation, he said, we go on this day and we start the day after. He said, what time do you think you'll finish at Buckingham Palace? I said, well, I don't. I said, quite frankly, it's not something that I want to ask the Queen if she could sort of speed it up a bit. And I said, my understanding of how you get awards is you go in alphabetical order, and W, Wilkinson's not going to be as if I was Akbar or something like that. And as it happens, he said, another little aside, I was next to Johnny Wilkinson, who your Australian listeners will know only to, because it was the year that he kicked the winning goal. So Johnny and I were standing together all for thick end of an hour waiting to go and bow, and because he got the OBE same time as I did. Anyway, cut long story short, I said, I think I'll probably get away about 5 or 6 o'clock that night. He said, well, this thing kicks off really the next day at 11 o'clock at the embassy, European embassy, just off Tiananmen Square in Beijing. So he said, maybe you could catch a flight and still be here. And he said, that would be a great story for me coming in, because we've got TV interviews to do and so on. That if you've got somebody who's just come from Buckingham Palace. So They had a car lined up at Buckingham Palace to take me straight to Heathrow Airport. I was on British Air. It was all taken care of. Everybody knew what was happening in advance
Yeah.
except me. So I arrived. Oh, yes, Mr. Wilkinson, we were expecting you. You're on seat 1A on the night flight to Beijing. So off I got my own menu, and it said congratulations, and there was champagne. It was fantastic fun.
Lovely. Lovely.
Little old me at 30, 31, 32 years of age or whatever at that time. I think I was 2000. Yeah, I was 30. I was 30 actually. If it was 2000, no, I wasn't.
No,
What am I
you
on
were
about?
50.
I
Yeah,
was
you were
50.
50.
50. Yeah, maths has never been my beckoning. So I was 50. So I
So Johnny
went.
Wilkinson was 30.
He was 30. That was it, something like that. Anyway,
Yeah.
when we were coming down to land in Beijing, it was a night flight, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. The stewardess came up and said, "We don't you get off the plane. You're going through on diplomatic immunity,
Yeah.
and you won't go through. They're sending the embassy car to the bottom of the steps on the aeroplane, and
Oh,
you're
fab.
going to get." So, in fact, you can't believe this. And I had to try and make out that this was like normal for me. So,
Yeah.
well, all I wanted to do was get my phone out
You
and take
just come from the
photos and
palace.
this. Yeah, but so this Jag came with a Union Jack on one wing and a U flag on the other wing.
Yeah.
And as we came out of the airport, you can't believe it. And I don't believe you've been to Beijing and at the airport and gone into town, but it's all 8-lane highways. Well, I have
Yeah,
got to
yeah, yeah.
say, they had closed every highway. I'd got outriders in front of me. I'd got police cars with blue flashing lights. It was like Trump thing. And we went straight down for the best part of 20 minutes from the airport right into Tiananmen Square, where you see the big picture of
Yeah,
Mao
yeah, yeah.
and also in front of those forbidden gardens
I know
there
where you
and
are.
that
Yeah.
forbidden city. You know exactly where I am. Every road I had this for me all the way, and you could see cars and police officers all stopping cars at every junction until I arrived there and got straight out. I was allowed a quick shower, clean your teeth, one thing, and then straight into an interview. But you talk about an experience. That
Yeah, it
was
was an
an
experience.
experience that you could never forget. I couldn't
No,
believe
and
it. Yeah,
well, I would say it was a few days you could never forget
yeah,
from,
exactly.
you
Anyway,
know, it's
there it is. Very,
wonderful.
very, very, very humbled, very fortunate, very thankful for what's turned out to be okay.
Yeah, I think it definitely has. I think it's been
Yeah.
a very blessed life and a very hardworking one.
Hardworking, massive
Yeah,
commitment. You don't talk about the personal things, but it's, yeah, I've worked hard and I've never
mm.
been around. I've always said to my kids, I've been a lousy father, but a good provider. They don't accept that, but that's what I think. But yeah, life's like that.
Well, I think sometimes you've got to listen to what your kids tell you, and
Yeah,
if
yeah.
they think that you weren't a lousy father, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have been. Knowing you as I do, the sort of through work and the way that you nurture people and the relationships that you have, I'm pretty sure that you haven't been lousy in any part of your life.
Yeah, but you ask a battery hen whether what life's like, and it doesn't know any different. It doesn't know what it's like pecking worms and stuff out in the fields. So I'm not sure.
Well, that's true enough too.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah,
true enough too.
yeah.
Philip,
Good, good.
that was incredible. And I know that so many listeners are really going to resonate with your story. And this is, but before we wrap up, let's do a quick recap. If you could just give one, what is the single biggest takeaway you want people to remember from our conversation? And there's been a
Don't take
lot.
Yeah, don't take no for an answer. Be prepared to make decisions. Speak with conviction and sincerity. And if you're 70% right and 30% wrong, that's okay. but I'm not going to use the word, but Jay.
Absolutely. Agreed. Agreed. I love that. And for everyone listening, here's my challenge to you. Take one thing from today's episode and apply it to your life. This week, today. Maybe it's reaching out to someone who can mentor you, or maybe it's finally taking that leap you've been scared of. Whatever it is, take action. And if this episode inspired you, make sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with someone who needs to hear these words of wisdom. And if you have a question or a topic you want me to cover in a future episode, please send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for tuning in to What I Wish I Knew at 30. And remember, your best chapters are still ahead. So from myself, Fran Harper, host of What I Wish I Knew at 30, and from my very special guest, Philip Wilkinson, would like to say thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Philip, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for your stories. And I know everyone will absolutely have loved what you shared with us today.
Pleasure. Go well, as you